When we speak about Nile Valley civilization, we need to clarify the question of geography, chronology, and epistemology. In other words, how do we know what we know? And so the question of what is Nubia, where is it, and what is the significance is something that we have to clarify.
Nubia today has become synonymous with the word black, but in fact it has its roots from the ancient Egyptian word of Nuri, in reference to the gold, where the gold mines were. So it's very important for us to keep that in perspective when we use this word, not to use it out of context to refer to a people. More so than not, the word Nubia, when it becomes synonymous with black, kind of takes things out of context when we're talking about the Nile Valley. Egyptologists often refer to as anyone of African descent, or dark-skinned people, or brown or black faces, as the Greeks may have called them. They refer to them as Nubians. Whether it's the wife of Mentuhotep, Queen T, who was the wife of Amenhotep III, anyone of any type of dark-complected person, first thing they say, this person must have been Nubian. And it kind of plays psychological games with us, because when we think of that aspect and we say that Nubian is black, we're kind of saying that those people are black, and we give a reference or inferring, that the others are not. So we want to kind of tell the world that we understand what Nubian means. Nubian means gold, or Nub is gold, not black.
Usually the history is divided up and fragmented. And you learn Egypt separately, and then you learn Nubia and the Sudan separately. Then the Sudan in the east is the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, which was dominated by the English during the period of colonization from the 16 and 17, 1800s. Then if you go across Africa, you come to the Western Sudan, and that was dominated by the French, and that's where you have Mali and Chad and Central African Empire and Niger. And so you need to look at this enormous African map in order to appreciate just where Nubia and the Sudan is located and how important it is. But you're talking about the Nile Valley civilization. That would be the most important geographical point to make, that the Nile has its origin in the heart of Africa, in the Great Lakes region of Central Africa, around Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, Lake Albert, and the so-called Lake Victoria, Lake Nyanza, come together, and they produce the source of the Nile. And then that source begins a 4,000-plus journey up Africa and into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile is unique. It's the only river that flows that way. Now, the last 1,000 miles of that journey is the greatest civilizing process in the history of the world. In other words, high culture and civilization was reached by Africans in the Egyptian part and in the Sudanese part. And both Egyptian and Sudanese parts include Nubia. So when you look at a map, you'll see a boundary line between Egypt and the Sudan. And Nubia will be in this part around Aswan. That'll be the Egyptian Kemetic part. And then when you go over the Egyptian-Sudanese border into the heartland of the Sudan, then you come into the famous Dongola Reach area, where there's a bend in the Nile. And it's around that bend in the third and fourth cataract that you have the great civilizations of Kush that were referred to the Napatan period. And then a later period closer to the modern era of the Greeks and the Romans would be the Meridic period, around the capital Meroe, and then also around the capital Napata. But an even earlier period in this whole fantastic area would be Kerma. And when you're speaking of Kerma, you're talking Middle Kingdom, 2000 BC to 1500 BC, that 500-year period. And so when we say Nubia and the Sudan, you're talking of an unfolding of the history of the Nile Valley, which is extraordinary. And for me to have experienced it in one trip was a dream of a lifetime.
So you have the Amos dynasty, you have the Tutmos dynasty, and then you have the Amenephis dynasty. Three great African family dynasties of male and female rulers, of great builders for eternity, of those who raised anew the spiritual relationship of the creation to humanity, and who raised anew the belief in the moral and ethnic core of the Nile, the concept of Ma'at, living by a moral and ethnic code to be worthy of the God within reflecting the God without. And so to go to Tel Hamana and Saqqara as an introduction to Nubia was enormous.
On trips there, we were able to visit the three great points of history in Nubian civilization, or should I say the so-called Nubian civilization. The first being Kermi, Napata, and last the Meroitic civilization. And you have to keep in mind that these areas were given their names from present day or modern day settlements around them. Like for example, Kerma. It's very important when you understand the history of Kerma, because Kerma has its history probably older than any other form of civilization we have in the Nile Valley. But unfortunately, we don't know what the people of that time referred to themselves as because there was no written script. Kerma gets its name from a modern-day village in close proximity. Napata and Meroe, not really quite sure where they get their names from, because once again, we're dealing with Nubian history. They went through periods of time where history was unrecorded, literally, because there was no script. Up until the point of Egyptian or the Kemetic domination or infusion, if you will, the Nubians did not have a written script. Later on in history, and during the Meroitic period, they adopted their own script, which was, again, taken from the Meta Netia. In fact, if you look at the alphabet, you can see that the alphabetic signs or symbols were derived from the Meta Netia. Today, this language, like early Nubian, or how should I say Nubian history prior to the Kemetic infusion, is undecipherable because we cannot read this script. I guess we have to find what they refer to as a modern-day Rosetta Stone to be able to translate the Meroitic and break the code. If you come into Sudan, first place you enter is Khartoum. Then you make your journey north. So in a sense, we were going back in time, but making our stops at the most current locations first. For example, the first place was Meroe. When we went to Meroe, we got a chance to see the ancient cemetery, or the necropolis, the pyramid field of Meroe, which to me is probably one of the most beautiful places on earth in terms of ancient architecture and how it contrasts between the sky and the sand. It's beautiful. It's like, you know, it's breathtaking. There's something about Meroe that does something to you when you're there. we speak in terms of Merowe, you have to talk about the